Perspectivists, did you choose to come to Earth? In today's episode with a great friend of mine, Pierre Herring, we're going to walk through a unique belief that comes from the Mormon religion, the Church of Latter-day Saints. This idea that you actually were living in a pre-existent place or realm with God and you chose to come live this life on Earth. We talk about Pierre's life experience, learning about these beliefs, and what those beliefs mean for people who grew up thinking like this. Now, I personally never knew this. I didn't know it was a part of the Mormon story of how we came to be and who we are. But if you're interested in that, and you want to hear from somebody who grew up, lived their whole life this way, and now has chosen to go beyond and to leave that way of thinking, this is your opportunity. Pierre is an amazing person. He's used a ton of tools throughout his life to help the world. He's served as a police officer. He's served as a hypnotist, helping people overcome some of the worst anxieties, PTSDs, addictions. And now he serves the world as an inspiration of how you can take your culture and your story, evolve it, take the good, and also allow it to expand to be something more. It's an incredible episode, and I can't wait to share my friend with you. Hello, Perspectivists. Welcome to another episode of the Perspectivity Podcast, where we are going to spend time with Pierre, one of my best friends, I'd have to say. We met about a year ago, but now best friends, and someone who inspires me every day to not only become a better person, but to serve at a higher level because there's so many people who need it. So Pierre, I guess I'd just start by, if you want to just say who you are, what you do, but also, what's most important to you in your life right now?
Wow, that's interesting. First off, I'm Pierre Herring, and Mark is one of my best friends. Met about a year ago. He inspires me every day and helps me want to serve at a higher level. So I think that's important to know, too, that that's part of our friendship, that you've used the word mentor to describe me, and I would use the same word to describe you. And I think that's part of what makes our relationship really special, is we're both trying to be better versions of ourselves so that we can serve at a higher level and do more things in the world to a bigger sphere of people. So I appreciate you.
Wow.
A great deal.
Dude, thank you. It's funny thinking about this because it's so real. And one of the things that bonded us is we have a core belief that people can get better, that they can heal from even the worst traumas, that no matter what comes to you in life, you can respond in a way that not only makes your life better, but it's actually a happy life, it's an impactful life. And we believe that because we both have been through a lot of very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
And today we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about some core beliefs that come from your upbringing. Before we go there, would you mind just telling us a brief snippet of maybe one of the harder challenges that you've had to overcome in your life and what it meant to you to overcome that challenge?
Wow. I mean, the biggest one that comes to mind is, I was a police detective, police sergeant, spent 16 years of my life doing that, and then suffered a traumatic brain injury on duty. And the fallout from that was remarkable. I mean, complete change in my physical abilities to do all the things I used to do, my mental abilities to even process information and interact with people, my emotional makeup completely changed. And because of the combination of those things, I wasn't able to be a police officer anymore. So that's as brief as I can make that. The few years after that, the several years after that, as I rebuilt myself to become who I am now, which is still different than who I was before, that was a big challenge.
Wow. And it's crazy because I'd love to just bring it out for people to hear. Why did you become a police officer?
Oh, geez. So in 2001, I was a manager doing marketing for the Hilton Corporation. And me and a couple buddies were just, doing our things, and we were working and having a great time, and 9/11 happened. And I was at the gym playing racquetball early in the morning in South Lake Tahoe, California. And I came out of the racquetball court, saw 9/11 happening on the TVs, booked it to the office, and we're all watching 9/11 happen together. And a group of us are like, why are we selling hotels? I mean, it doesn't matter what hotel somebody's in. So that got us all three talking, and I left, became a cop. Ted left, became a firefighter. Elisa left, became a public safety dispatcher, and we all stayed connected because we were all in that community doing all this stuff together. But that's why I became a cop.
That hits me because you probably were making okay money in what you were doing before.
Oh yeah.
And you actually wanted to put yourself in a situation where you'd go into danger, because you knew people needed it. And that hits me deep. That's a part of your story that really resonated deeply with me. And today, I'd like to highlight something interesting about your upbringing, something you've talked about on other podcasts, and we're going to link that podcast. That's Strangers You Know, right? We'll link that podcast. If you want to hear Pierre's full story, a lot of what he's been through, kind of the trajectory of his life, definitely check that out. It's well worth it. I've listened to it. I loved that episode. It was a longer deep dive into who you were. And I already loved you, trusted you, wanted to be more like you. So being able to really soak in your life like that was very beneficial to me. Today, we're about expanding our perspective and expanding the narrative of who we are so that we can alter the life that we're living. And you have a unique upbringing. You want to share with us kind of your cultural upbringing,
right?
And kind of what that was like for you.
So I was born into a Mormon family. My dad was, raised from birth as a Mormon. My mom was raised in France as a Catholic, and she converted to Mormonism. So she brought a relatively pretty strict Catholic upbringing into her Mormonism. So I was raised by a Mormon, and then a Catholic converted to Mormonism, and it ended up being a very high demand, strict Mormon upbringing, I guess I'd call it.
Wow. And so from a Mormon upbringing, we've talked about this before, there's a lot.
Oh yeah.
Right? But with any culture, there's stories about what makes us who we are, about how we came here, what we're here for. And we centered in on a belief. And this is something I'm really excited to share with anybody who's listening to this podcast. If you're here and you've never been introduced to Mormonism, you're going to be like, what? Or at least I was. You're going to be like, what? This is the craziest thing.
Yeah.
It shocked me when I learned it. So, and I'm just going to share with you what I understand. You can walk me through how you learned about this. But I was having a conversation with people who I did not know were Mormon. And, for those listening who are, LDS or Church of Latter-day Saints. I was having a conversation with them about life and, their beliefs about life. And they told me that they believed that they were with God before they came here. They told me that they chose to come here, and they actually even felt like they chose the people they were coming here with. And I'm looking at you and you're like, yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
To me, that's insane.
Yeah,
Like, that's the wildest thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
So how did you come to believe this? Like, where does this come out, learning this?
There's a thing, did they ever mention the words, the plan of salvation?
No.
Okay, this is part of the plan of salvation. And the whole plan of salvation, a very brief description, is you are living with God as a spirit child of God before coming to this earth. There's a grand council in heaven, and God proposes, he presents his plan for us to grow and develop. And Jesus stands and says, yes, I support you, God, and I'll go down and I'll be the savior for everyone. Satan, who is also God's son, stands and says, I'll go down, I'll make everybody believe, and I'll compel everyone, and I'll save all your children, but I want the glory for it. And Jesus says, no. I'll go down, I'll die for them, I'll let everyone have their own free agency, and God, the glory be thine. And God said, well, Jesus is the right plan. And there's a war in heaven, and a third of God's children choose to stay with Satan because they think that's the better plan, and 2/3 choose to follow Jesus. And the 2/3 are the people who are born onto this earth. And Satan and all his third came to this earth to be tempters and to try to dissuade us and to be impediments to God's plan, because now they're mad at God and God kicked them out for rebelling. So that all happened before we even came. So we've all chosen, we were all God's spirit children. We all chose to follow Jesus. And then we all chose to be born here on earth. And we're born here on earth. And this earth is just one of the steps in our eternal progress. And after we die, we go to a paradise or a spirit prison. And I mean, it sounds harsh, but if you're baptized in the Mormon faith, you get to go to paradise. Anybody else, including Mother Teresa, and anybody else, no matter how good, righteous, whatever you want to call it, ends up in spirit prison until some Mormon missionaries from paradise can go and convert them to Mormonism, and they can be baptized for the dead in a Mormon temple. Then they can go to paradise. And then after the millennium, then there will be this judgment, because Jesus is coming back, right? There'll be 1,000 years while Jesus is here. He'll rule and reign over the earth. Mormons will be the thing. We'll be doing all of this Mormon temple work, doing all the baptisms for the dead for everybody who's ever lived, because everybody has to be baptized. And then there's a judgment, and you'll be assigned to one of these 3 degrees of glory: celestial kingdom, terrestrial kingdom, telestial kingdom. And that's where you'll live forever. So that's the whole plan of salvation, is God's spirit child deciding to come to earth. You live your earth, you go to the spirit paradise prison place, then there's the judgment, and you end up in one of these 3 degrees of glory, of eternal life. That's the plan of salvation.
So in this plan of salvation, this is the story that people believe about who they are, what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
This is why, because Mormon missionaries, they choose to go on these missions, right?
Yeah. They pay for it themselves, by and large.
They literally pay, but you're not paying to do work. You're paying to literally like live out your divine, eternal, spiritual mission.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though you're already going into the paradise.
Yeah.
Which to me is noble. I've met a lot of Mormon missionaries. I've never met missionaries that are so kind, nice, and even accepting.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet there's also this like, oh, here comes the gang. And so they're always in a pair. And I have no hate against this. I'm just being funny. But there's like a pair. And one time I was on one side of the lake. And there was this side of the lake and this side of the lake. And there were 2 on one side of the lake and 2 on the other side of the lake. And I was in the middle. And I was like, oh no, like they're
Mormon missionary
up.
sandwich.
Yeah, I was like, they're coming. And because I think that's something that we shy away from, just talking about how this, like our religious goals and our spiritual work plays out in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the average experience for someone who's not Mormon. They're like, white shirts coming at me. They're going to try to talk to me.
Yeah.
And there's nothing right or wrong about that. But it's interesting to know what their life story is.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to center in on this because this fascinates me as a psychologist. As a psychologist, I know that one of the most important things to a human throughout development is their freedom to choose.
Mm-hmm.
When people feel like their freedom to choose is restricted, it's a real problem. And I believe it's Heidegger, a philosopher, talked about this experience that humans have. They feel thrown into their world. Mm-hmm. They kind of just are plopped into this world at a random social time, at a random, with random parents and people. Right. It's all random. It's very scary. And I know lots of people who feel this, who are maybe Christian or of other religions, but don't have this same story or belief that they chose to come to earth. And so this is what's fascinating to me about this. It sounds like this story, why is it so sticky? Why do you think it's so sticky?
In the Mormon religion? I mean, it's one of the fundamental things. I mean, you grow up. I don't remember in my life not knowing about the plan of salvation. I mean, it's one of those things your parents are talking about. I have older siblings too. So, in the faith, there's family home evening. Every Monday night, you're supposed to get together and have a little lesson about churchy stuff, and then like play a game, and then have a little snack or something, some kind of family home evening that's gospel centered. So by the time I came along, especially as the third kid, family home evenings ended going, and we all have a little lesson. And so they're talking about prophets. There's a living prophet on the earth, talking about the plan of salvation, talking about Jesus, talking about the Book of Mormon. These things are being taught. I mean, I heard them before I could speak. I was being taught these things. And then even my older brother, being raised in the church, you go to nursery from 18 months old. When my parents would go to church, they'd go to the first congregational meeting, and then when they'd go to their other meetings, the little kids go to nursery. And in nursery, there's little picture boards of Jesus and the plan of salvation and the prophets and this and that and the other thing. And then when you're three, you go into primary and you start getting lessons and songs about all these things. There's songs about the plan of salvation and about prophets and about the life before and the life after. I mean, this is all just part of my DNA at that point. I mean, it is the truth. I never doubted any aspect of that entire plan of salvation. I am a spirit child of God. He created me as his spirit child, and I was a fully conscious, functioning, decision-making being before I came to this earth, and I chose to follow God's plan, and Jesus is my Savior, and that's why I'm here, so that I can have this body, gain my earthly experience, grow, and then go on to the next phase of the plan.
Wow. That to me is incredible. And thinking about that belief, I see a lot of people who also wrestle with God, where they're like, why did God give me this life? Why did God, it actually, instead of having, in psychology, I know you'll know this, is we use a term locus of control. Internal locus of control versus external locus of control.
Right.
My experience is a lot of times in my upbringing of primarily Methodist / non-denominational / a mix of Baptist, just a whole hodgepodge of Protestant Christianity, I saw and I still see a lot of people who feel an external locus of control. That it's like, Jesus, take the wheel.
Right.
God has all the control and
Right.
you're just experiencing it. And life is bad for you when you try to reject that and take control. Is there any element of that baked into this story, or is it more of an internal locus of control?
Now you're getting into the complexities that are, I think, pretty interesting, because agency, free agency, freedom to choose is such a fundamental part of Mormon doctrine. In the pre-existence is what that's called. That's the place where we lived before we came here. In the pre-existence, we had our agency, and that's why Christ's plan won out over Satan's, because Satan was going to take away our agency and compel us all to obey enough so that all of God's children would be saved. Christ's was, no, everyone gets their agency. They're all free to choose. I'll be their Savior. Whoever chooses this path can come, and whoever doesn't want to doesn't have to. So agency was really baked in there. So you've got that as like this underpinning doctrine. But it's juxtaposed against this incredibly strict religion where they tell you, what you can eat and not eat, who you can have sex with and not have sex with, when you can start dating, what kind of words you can use. I mean, it's a very strict religion. They say you're free to choose, but then we're going to tighten the screws in every way we can on your life. So I feel like for me, it caused this, I'm free to choose, but I have all these rules, so I'm just going to choose to obey them. I'm just going to choose to obey them, because it was the only place I could find relief from the pressure of freedom of choice versus strictness of life. Is to decide that I had chosen this. Okay, oh, yep, I chose that. That's how I'm going to be, and I'm free to choose to keep being that way. Because the moment you kind of start popping and the springs start busting loose, there are repercussions culturally and straight up from the religion that can be a problem in your life.
Wow. So one thing I'm thinking about when you're saying that is that if the plan of salvation says that Jesus came down and offered you a choice,
right,
and Satan also came down and doesn't offer you a choice.
Well, his plan was to come down, be the Savior, and not give us a choice, compel us to all to obey, to go. But since that plan got derailed, he's now mad, and God cast him out. And now he's here with his third to just cause problems.
So if you leave, this is a tough one I'm working out here.
Yeah.
If you make the choice not to obey, the righteous practices of Mormonism and you leave.
Right.
What does that mean for your freedom of choice at the salvation level or at the spiritual level?
So it's like everything else. The subject depends on who you ask, right? You ask someone who in my family or a close friend who's still in the faith, I'm a lost and wandering sheep and my soul is in jeopardy. And I will not make it to the celestial kingdom. In fact, because I was raised in the faith and once had strong faith in the church, I'm worse off than someone who had never been Mormon. They potentially will receive more grace than I did because I had a more full knowledge and awareness of the truth that I have rejected. And so I am more, to talk, from a cop's perspective, I'm more criminally culpable.
Wow.
Because I knew and I pushed it away, I rejected it.
Some people interpret that in the Bible, the unforgivable sin, to take God's name in vain, as that.
Yeah. In the Mormon religion, it's sons of perdition. If you have a full knowledge of God and you reject it, you are a son of perdition and you don't get to go to any of the 3 degrees of glory. You go to outer darkness. You don't get to be resurrected. You don't get your body back. You're cast off with Satan forever.
So,
and people define the criteria to become a son of perdition differently. Even different Mormon prophets through time have defined it differently. Some have said, if you're have you heard the concept of Mormon priesthood?
Oh.
Okay, there's different levels of Mormon priesthood. If you achieve a certain level of priesthood and turn away, you're a son of perdition, gone. Others are like, no, you really have to know God exists to the point where you've seen with your own eyes Jesus and or God. That's the only way you can be a son of perdition. So the definition kind of changes.
Yeah.
But according to some definitions, I am officially a son of perdition.
Wow. So while you're believing in Mormonism, throughout your daily life, are there still things where you feel like you don't have a choice? Or do you always feel like you have a choice?
It depends on how good you are at mental gymnastics. I could convince myself that I was free to choose. But now that I'm out and I'm actually free to choose, I don't feel like I was free to choose.
Wow. Okay, so if you don't mind, let's try something here.
Yeah,
Imagine you are, and if you don't want to do this, totally fine.
I'm fine.
But I want to do this exploration because what I really want to figure out is what kind of cultural beliefs or cultural stories support our need for autonomy, support our need for belongingness, and are able to do so in a way where we can have the most diversity among the way we manifest those needs.
Okay.
In this case, what you're talking about is you can get lots of support for belongingness.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of support for autonomy, but in a very strict way.
Yeah.
So the support for autonomy hinges on you being completely believing in this to the point where it would be silly not to choose it.
Right.
So let's say I'm Mormon. We're both Mormon, and you're my mentor in some sense.
Okay.
And I have a practical issue with my career.
Okay.
I feel like, I went to school for nursing, and I feel like I have to be a nurse. And I'm feeling like I just don't have a choice about what I get to do with my career. From a Mormon perspective, how would you help me through that problem?
I'd probably want to know first a little bit more. Why would you? And I know this is a made-up scenario, so feel free to keep making stuff up.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like you need to be a nurse?
It just feels like I don't have any other choices. It's like I kind of defaulted to it. My parents are nurses. Like I went to school because it made sense because my parents did it, but now I'm so far down there that I feel like I have to do it. Like I don't have a choice at this point.
Okay.
People are going to be really upset if I switch what I'm doing. Or I think they will be upset.
So I think the default, traditional Mormon approach to that would begin with, have you spent time praying about it? Because in the Mormon faith, personal revelation from God is a pretty big deal.
Okay.
Like, yeah, he speaks to a prophet and the prophet tells us his word, but we can also receive individual inspiration, revelation from God. Like when you're deciding who to marry, what career to pursue, what major to get in college, always fast and pray and seek God's will to know concerning your life. Because God can always make more of you than you can. And if you are confused about anything like that, the default is to really, of course, think about it and give it your best intellectual effort and take it to God in prayer and get that guidance and try to figure out a way for those things to be in harmony, and then you know you're on the right path.
Is God telling you what to do, or is God helping you figure out, like, is it like God will tell you the choice to make, or is it that God will empower you to be a better decision maker?
That's a great question. And again, it depends on who you ask. Some will teach that God will guide your path and tell you what career to pursue. He will tell you who to marry. He'll tell you when to have kids.
Wow.
He'll tell you these things. Others will say, no, we're here to learn. And sometimes you need to just make a decision and start down the path, and God will either confirm that that's the right path, or he'll tell you that it's not the right path, or he'll knock you off the path, and that's how you know that it's not the right path for you. So there's this spectrum of God will tell you what to do step by step by step by step by step to, go out and live your life and look for God's confirmation, and he'll support you in what you do. And people fall everywhere in that spectrum. But something you said a minute ago kind of made me think about something. Freedom of choice, right? Part of what's interesting about how freedom of choice is spun is, for example, the word of wisdom. Have you heard that phrase? Word of wisdom is the Lord's law of health. No alcohol, no tobacco, no coffee, no tea kind of stuff, right? And the big focus is on what you can't do. There's a few verses about, eat grain and eat meat sparingly. There's a few things like that, but nobody really pays attention to that. It's really the strictness of alcohol, coffee, tobacco, tea. And as long as you've never had alcohol, you are always free to choose to have alcohol. But once you've had alcohol, you are no longer free to have never had it. So you maintain ultimate freedom of choice by living in the strictness of religion. And that can be applied to anything. If you're a virgin, you can always choose to go have sex. But you can never, once you've had sex, choose to be a virgin again. So staying a virgin gives you the ultimate freedom and the biggest palette of ability to choose. What does that do to you?
Okay, so this is fascinating to me because there's two ways to look at this for me.
Okay.
The first thing that pops into my mind is actually a psychological theory in moral psychology called moral foundations theory. And it's a particular piece where Jonathan Haidt identified that there's certain people from different cultures that have this purity foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And so normally when you talk about something like drinking alcohol, having sex, these things, it's a moral transgression against your purity.
Okay.
This is fascinating to me because with this story, the way that you've brought it down,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a moral transgression against your purity. It is literally a limitation on your ability to choose.
And the beautiful thing, I'm saying that sarcastically, is it's both.
Yeah.
It's absolutely both, because there is an intense focus on purity. Women are encouraged to marry a virgin male who went on a Mormon mission. And if a guy has either had sex or didn't go on his mission, his dating pool shrinks immensely, because they're taught you marry a pure, wholesome return missionary. So, that's intense. And men, on the other hand, are equally taught you marry a virgin. You marry a good Mormon girl who's going to do the right Mormon things. Like there's the prophet right now is Russell M. Nelson. His wife gave a talk in the past few years. No, was it her that gave it? No. It was Elder Bednar, one of the 12 apostles. I don't know if you know the Mormon Church has 12 apostles.
There's 12 living apostles?
12 living apostles. A prophet and 12 living apostles. And
Whoa.
Elder Bednar is one of the apostles. And he gave a talk, and he talked about how a guy was dating a girl, and he really liked her, and he wanted to pursue the relationship. And while they were dating, the then Mormon prophet, Gordon B. Hinckley, stood at the podium at a general conference of the church which is a semi-annual gathering where we all watched the prophet speak on TV, and said that women should only have one set of earrings. They shouldn't have more than one. The prophet said this. And this young man who this apostle is talking about, the girl he was dating had 2 earrings. And he watched her. And he noticed that she didn't follow the counsel of the prophet. And so he wisely ended his relationship with her, because he knew he should marry someone who will listen to anything that the prophet says. Yeah.
That's so fascinating to me, especially that it is an extreme adherence to this group, that it was born in the land of the extreme opposite.
Yes.
And it makes perfect sense.
In fact, part of Mormon teaching is that this land of America, Columbus was inspired to come here so that there would be a free land in which this church could be founded. And that Joseph Smith was born in America so that there would be a land with a constitution that had freedom of religion, and that the entire reason the United States of America exists was for the creation of Mormonism.
Wow. And this is something I've been discovering for people listening. They know, if they don't know, this is your first time, I'm currently on a tour across all 50 United States, spending a week in each state, a couple days with you,
right?
Which is amazing. And we're trying to uncover, what has to happen to create a strong, empowered culture, a united culture that allows us to be different, but also to feel a sense of unity, a sense of camaraderie and what it means to be American. And one of the things that I've learned across this trip is that because America is looser in terms of what it means to be an American, people become very strongly interconnected with their groups, even more than if they had a tie to their country.
Right.
And so it's interesting that in Mormonism, it leverages that choice to say, we're going to choose to not compromise our health. I'm seeing a lot of parallels in what you're saying, and some of the people who just focus on like diet. I'm not going to eat processed foods. I'm not going to eat, foods that harm my body. Because if I choose to eat those, it compromises my ability to live life the way I want to or would choose to in other areas.
Those people got to make that choice. They got to research or find a source they trusted to go make the decision for themselves.
Some of them grew up with parents. Now,
yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they will not, because they will grow up in a household. And that's interesting. I always have felt a strong freedom of choice, but I think that's because I didn't have a strong, my mom died early. My dad was kind of just drinking. And I kind of built up my life. Even when I went to Christianity for real as a teenager, I made that choice like really fully of my own accord. And it was easy to leave the type of Christianity I was part of because I had full choice making it, full choice out of it, and I didn't buy the idea that I would compromise my purity.
Right.
That's really powerful. So what I care a lot about is I care about you and how you got to be who you are.
Thank you.
And you and I bond over something, which is that we both really appreciate and we choose to believe that which has utility.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so what's powerful about that is we recognize that some beliefs, if you're deep into the world of psychology, you have epistemic beliefs, and that's truth-based beliefs. You believe that it's just an inherent truth. You don't believe it because it serves you. You believe it because it's true.
Right.
And then you have the teleological beliefs, beliefs that are a means to an end. And we believe that there are beliefs to have that sometimes it's good to adopt a belief even if you don't know it's true, if it serves you.
Right.
So what do you say to the young Mormon guy over here who says, man, Pierre, I mean, I know you've been through a lot. Going through the Mormon lifestyle was a lot for you, but look how you turned out. You're an amazing guy. At the time you were in the Mormon church, you're an amazing guy. I would be really happy if my son ended up like you. So I kind of, even though you're probably right, I kind of am afraid to not choose that lifestyle. This seems like it has a lot of utility.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person?
Wow, it's tricky. It really is. I can't say I didn't learn, grow, and develop a lot in the Mormon church. I mean, I got to go live in Japan on my mission and learn Japanese. I mean, how else would I have gotten that opportunity? Super cool stuff. Um, and I think if my kids would have been younger, I would have been scared to death to leave the church because of the utility. I'd have been afraid, was there another way to raise my kids that is going to be as good and wholesome for them? I think something that people in the church, well, one thing is we're taught, part of that being ingrained from youth is, man, there's so many angles to approach this from. This is a deep one. This is a really good one. I'll start here. That there's a very specific definition of happiness. And true happiness can only come through adherence to the laws and ordinances of the gospel of Jesus Christ, as contained most fully in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that any other happiness outside of that is a false happiness. And these people out there, they think they're happy, but they're not really happy, because we have the true happiness. What they have is fleeting. We have true joy. So there's a fear there that if you leave, you'll never be happy. And I'm circling back around to answer you. So although I had some happy times at church and in church functions and doing church things and on my mission in Japan, there was some happiness there. That is important and is part of who I am. What I've learned is that happiness is not exclusive to the Mormon church. So to come back to answer your question, I've got some really great friends. I'm going to point at my off-camera friend here and my on-camera friend who weren't raised Mormon, who are doing amazing things with their lives. So Mormon kid who sees me and thinks, you've got a great life. That didn't just come from being Mormon. Sure, it's part of it. But my longest standing partner at the police department, Jeff Robertson, he's a great dude, not a Mormon. If my sons turned out like him, I'd be stoked out of my mind. So the ability to achieve greatness, whatever your definition of it is not attached. Kid, it's not attached to being a Mormon. You can do it outside or inside. That's kind of where I begin that conversation, is to just expand the vision to know that greatness happens in many contexts. And just because it happened once in a Mormon context doesn't mean that's the only place it happens.
Wow. I love that. I'd say the same thing about Christianity in general.
I would too.
Mm-hmm.
I would too.
That's something that you saying that, I think it's really important, because a lot of us are holding on to things that are serving us in one way, killing us in the other.
Oh, yeah. Well, and how do I don't even know how to articulate this. If the Mormon church is a good tool for somebody, it has great utility for some people to go find happiness, would it matter if what the church is teaching is deceitful? And if it's deceitful, but still useful, what's the relationship between the usefulness and deceit or covering or hiding or manipulating? I mean, people can be manipulated to do good things all the time. Does that mean it's okay to manipulate people?
Well, Jesus didn't think Satan was right.
Exactly. And there's been a lot of discussion about that over the years.
I've ran into that question. The question I've been asking a lot of people and myself is, what if the Bible is the ultimate deception? And that's a question that, if you're listening to this and you hear that, I'm not saying that's what I think, but I do think if you're afraid of a question,
it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I have enough faith that if there is a God out there, and I sometimes I believe in God, sometimes I'm not sure, but I think that the God out there is not trying to trick me. I don't think that if my heart is honestly trying to know the truth, that God is going to keep me away from it. And I don't think you should fear any question. I think there are lots of questions that will bring you pain, and I think it's reasonable to fear questions because they bring you so much pain, even thinking about them, you know? But I think that's where you develop mental fitness.
Yeah.
You decide, I'm going to become someone who can contemplate any question without becoming cold. And I think that's what I'm trying to figure out how to do, because I think it's the only way you're going to unify a world.
Yeah.
You have to be able to. And so thinking about what you said, what is a core value or life lesson right now that I'm going to raise the bar on this one? A core value or life lesson that you have right now that you aspire to live your life by because you believe the world will become better if you do.
I think there are a lot, actually, but I feel like the probably, I don't know, most important one, I guess, is a belief that everyone is in a position of power. And the struggle isn't to eliminate problems. The struggle isn't to not have struggle at all, but it's really to find that power and become more powerful. Because I mean, think about any problem you have. The only reason it's a problem is because you don't have the resources or the strength or the whatever to take care of it. If you develop your power, including your resource base, intellectually, physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially, if you expand your power base, then you're bigger than all your problems. And if everybody could realize how powerful they are and really tap into their own power and then use that power to make their own decisions and to do the things they want to do and to strive for the goals they want to, if everybody just really knew how powerful they were and believed that, I think that there wouldn't be fear, there wouldn't be anxiety, there wouldn't be depression. I mean, so much would go away with a knowledge of how absolutely powerful we all are.
Do you think, I'm going to follow up on that, how do you ensure that the power we cultivate doesn't corrupt?
That's choice. I've got a really good friend who left the Mormon church, and people are giving him guff. They're like, because they thought his morality was based in Mormonism, and so kind of the joke, not joke, was now you can go out and rape and murder all the people you want, huh? He's like, yep, that's exactly right. Now I can rape and murder all the people I want. And they're like, what? He's like, yeah, I don't want to rape and murder anybody. So now I've raped and murdered all the people I wanted. And he's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
So I believe that human nature is basically good. And I'm okay if people would argue that point with me, but it's a useful belief for me. We're going back to utility.
Wow.
It's a really useful belief. And based on my experience across my different careers, I believe it's true. Even I was a cop for a long time and I put people in jail, and some for really bad things. I mean, there's very few people that I would go, that is not a very good dude. But do I think he could be a good dude? Yeah, I do think even those guys could be a good dude. And most of the people I put in jail were caught up in circumstance and feeling powerless and swept up in something, or feeling like they had to go do something because they were desperate. But if they all had tapped into this power, nobody wants to be in that position that I know.
Yeah.
They don't want to be in that position. They want to be in a position of power where they can have fun and live life and enjoy friends and experience different cool things. And so I believe in the goodness of people. So I don't worry about the power to corrupt. And if a bad egg or two pop up, but the other billion of us are doing really good, well, then that person won't really get much power anyway.
Wow. I think something, because I would disagree with you. Like you said, people could argue your point.
Yeah.
And something I haven't thought about until you just said this. What I think is a real problem. I believe that human nature is neither good nor bad. I believe that human nature is, honestly, largely about avoiding pain. and moving from a whatever state you're in now to a better one.
Mhm.
And I think that's why progress equals happiness. It's because if you're moving, if you're in the process of moving from a worse state to a better state, you experience positive
Well,
emotion.
there's all the stuff that goes with the anticipation and all everything
You got
about that. Yeah.
The anticipation literally satiates the anxiety,
Yeah.
and then the fulfillment gives a reward and pleasure and remotivates the process.
Yeah.
What I think's interesting is that I think a lot of good people run away from power because they have the realization that if they were to become corrupted with power, that would be worse than if they became corrupted without it. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
The person who doesn't want to become a millionaire because financially, with that amount of power, they're worried that they would become someone who would make the world worse than if they didn't have the power. And that's where I really like the argument. I've heard some people use the word meek. The meek will inherit the earth. And I've heard the definition of meek to be defined as those who have strong swords but swing them judiciously. And the idea being that you have to cultivate your power and you have to trust that you are going to use that power in the way that you already want to use it now. And so I would actually take what you'd say and I'd add a piece of advice. If you're worried about becoming corrupt with power, look at what you're doing now. If you won't give 10 cents of your dollar to someone, don't expect to give 10 million of your 100 million. And so should you be afraid? I guess I'd take what you said is I believe in the goodness potential of people. And I would say that the most important thing you should do is actualize the goodness in you now. Become someone who, if you become powerful, you'll be good, and allow yourself to cultivate power.
And for me, that's part of becoming powerful.
Oh.
Is being that kind of person that would do good things with power is part of becoming powerful. I mean, yeah, people can become powerful with evil intention, sure. But in the circles I'm in, where I am coming across some very, very powerful people nowadays, I am pleasantly surprised at how kind and good and generous are. I mean, the wealthy and super wealthy are, the pictures are painted of how terrible and awful they are. And there's a lot of theories on where that comes from and why that story is being told. Some of it's tied to religion, some is tied to, politics, and there's all that stuff in the background. But by and large, the wealthy to super wealthy people that I'm having these one-on-one conversations with are really, really good people. And their goodness is part of how they became so powerful. They built something with other people. They weren't building something on their own. Not many people build an empire by them. You can't build an empire on your own.
Wow.
So they're building it with other people. And when all of that interplay comes in, I think the people who are good with other people build more, and the people who actually care about other people are better at being good with people. And so it's kind of like this self-propelling thing where some really good people are doing some really good things.
Wow. I love that. I think that's a good point to end on too. If you're listening to this episode and you're like, I don't know, I'm skeptical, or I don't think that's true, or this is where, what I invite you to do is just be curious about why you have any of that skepticism. Pierre and I we spend a lot of time both living our beliefs in a way that we hope makes the world better and us better and serves. And also we embrace the idea that some of the things that we are thinking about, we don't know the full answers.
Right.
But we do believe that being open to really exploring the things we didn't know. It's how you were able to change your relationship to Mormonism and get to where you're at now. It's how I was able to too. And I think that's the key. That's the lesson. So I'd like to end by just asking you, what is something in your life right now that you appreciate because whatever it is, it's shining a light for the world. It's making the world brighter in some way.
Yeah. That's so easy. My wife.
Really?
Yeah. Lori.
That's true, by the way. I met your wife yesterday. the most intentional, loving hug. The way she hugged me and, everybody in the room,
Mhm.
I thought to myself, wow.
Yeah.
It actually shocked me. And part of me was like, to be in a marriage and hug people that way
Mhm.
and to see how you guys are interacting together, I was like, that is amazing.
She is amazing.
I'm all in. Like, I was like, wow.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, and talk about shining a light. She shines a light. She's bold, she's brave, she's courageous, she's brilliant, she's loving, she's compassionate, she is wise. She applies everything she's learned herself first, and so she's able to then take that and shine it out into the world in beautiful, amazing ways. I can't think of anything else that tops that to answer that question.
Wow.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Right on. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.